The flight attendant was asking if I wanted a drink, but I barely heard her. I was too busy rehearsing the moment in my head. The look on Derek's face when he opened his hotel room door and found me standing there, dressed in the red dress he loved, holding a bottle of the champagne we'd shared on our wedding night. "Ma'am? Something to drink?" "Just water, thank you." I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from a heart full of hope. In 3 hours, I would be in Miami. In 4 hours, I would be in my husband's arms. By tonight, we would be reconnecting in ways we hadn't connected in months. 10 years of marriage, a decade of building a life together, of raising our daughter Zoe, of weathering the storms that every couple faces. But lately, the storms had been constant, and the calm between them had grown shorter and shorter. Derek traveled more. He worked later. He seemed distracted when he was home, present in body but absent in spirit. I had convinced myself it was stress. His company was expanding, his responsibilities growing. Of course he was tired. Of course he was preoccupied. What husband wouldn't be, with the pressure he was under? But deep down, in the place where truth lives whether we acknowledge it or not, I knew something was wrong. I felt the distance between us widening, felt him pulling away even as I reached for him. And so I had planned this surprise, not just a romantic gesture, but a rescue mission for our marriage. The idea had come to me 3 weeks ago, during one of those sleepless nights when the bed felt too big and the silence too loud. Derek was in Chicago for a conference, and I was lying in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering when we had become strangers who shared a mortgage. I could fight for us, I decided. I could remind him of what we had, of who we were before work and responsibility, and the 1,000 small erosions of daily life had worn us down to polite roommates. His Miami trip was the perfect opportunity. 3 days at a luxury hotel, a conference that ended at 6 each evening, leaving the nights free. I would fly in on Friday, surprise him with dinner at the restaurant where we'd gotten engaged, spend the weekend rekindling what we'd lost. I planned everything meticulously. The hotel reservation in my name, just in case. The restaurant booking, confirmed twice. The lingerie I'd bought at that boutique Simone had recommended. Red lace, nothing like the practical cotton I usually wore. The speech I'd prepared in my head. The words that would tell Derek how much he still meant to me, how much I was willing to work for us. Simone had been the only person I'd told about the surprise. "Girl, that is so romantic," she'd said, her eyes lighting up with what I interpreted as enthusiasm. "Derek is going to be so shocked. He's a lucky man to have a wife who still fights for her marriage." My best friend since freshman year of college, Simone had been there through everything. She'd been my maid of honor, the first person I'd called when I found out I was pregnant with Zoe, the godmother who doted on my daughter like she was her own. In 15 years, she had never given me reason to doubt her loyalty. "You think it'll work?" I'd asked. "We've been so distant lately. Sometimes I feel like he's not even in the marriage anymore. He's just stressed. Work stuff. Men are like that. They get consumed by their careers and forget what's important." Simone had squeezed my hand. "This surprise will remind him. Trust me." I trusted her. I trusted them both. The plane touched down at Miami International at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the heat hit me like a wave as I stepped onto the jetway. Florida in September was brutal, but I didn't care. I was on a mission. The taxi ride to the hotel took 40 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to test my patience. I used the time to touch up my makeup, to check my hair, to rehearse my smile in the compact mirror I always carried. I wanted to look perfect. I wanted Derek to see me and remember why he'd chosen me in the first place. The hotel was everything the website had promised. A gleaming tower of glass and chrome overlooking Biscayne Bay. The kind of place that made you feel important just by walking through the lobby. Derek's company had done well for themselves, booking their sales team in a property like this. I approached the front desk with confidence, the overnight bag I'd packed slung over my shoulder. "Hi, I'm Mrs. Lawson. My husband is staying here. Derek Lawson, room 1412. I'm here to surprise him for our anniversary. Would it be possible to get a key to the room?" The concierge, a young woman with a professional smile, didn't hesitate. "Of course, Mrs. Lawson, that's so sweet. Let me just verify." She typed something into her computer, nodded at whatever she saw. Here you are. Room 1412. The elevators are to your left. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, thank you. This is perfect. I walked toward the elevators with my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. In a few minutes, I would see my husband's face transform from surprise to joy. In a few minutes, we would begin the work of saving our marriage. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt endless. I checked my reflection one more time in the mirrored walls, adjusted the neckline of my dress, took a deep breath. I was ready. I was so ready. Room 1412 was at the end of a long corridor, the Do Not Disturb sign hanging from the door handle. I paused for just a moment, key card in hand, savoring the anticipation. Then I slid the card into the lock, watched the light turn green, and pushed open the door. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. It took my eyes a moment to adjust, to make sense of the shapes on the bed, to understand what I was seeing. Two bodies, tangled together, naked, moving in a rhythm I knew intimately, because I had shared it with one of them for a decade. Derek, my husband. And beneath him, her face turned toward the door, eyes widening in horror as she recognized me. Simone, my best friend, the godmother of my child. Time stopped. The world stopped. My heart, which had been racing with anticipation moments before, simply ceased to beat. Monique! Simone's voice sharp with panic. Derek turned, and I watched his face cycle through emotions. Confusion, recognition, terror. The desperate scramble of a man caught in an indefensible position. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process the reality that was unfolding before me. My husband and my best friend, in a hotel room, naked, together. The surprise I had planned so carefully had become my own destruction. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, probably, though it felt like hours. Long enough for Derek to scramble off the bed, grabbing a sheet to cover himself. Long enough for Simone to sit up, her face a mask of guilt and fear. Long enough for me to see everything I needed to see. The wine glasses on the nightstand, two of them, nearly empty. The clothes scattered across the floor, his shirt tangled with her dress. The comfortable intimacy of their positions. The ease that spoke of familiarity, of practice, of repetition. This was not a one-time mistake. This was not a moment of weakness. This was something that had been happening long enough to become routine. Monique, Derek's voice was hoarse, pleading. Baby, I turned and walked out of the room before he could finish the sentence. The corridor stretched before me like a tunnel, endless and suffocating. I heard the door open behind me, heard Derek's footsteps, heard my name called again and again. But I kept walking, my legs moving on autopilot, my mind a blank white static of shock. The elevator doors opened as I approached, and I stepped inside, jabbing the button for the lobby with a finger that trembled visibly. Derek appeared at the end of the corridor, sheet wrapped around his waist like some pathetic toga, calling my name one final time as the doors slid closed between us. And then, I was alone. Falling 14 floors in a metal box, my reflection staring back at me from every mirrored surface. A woman in a red dress, here to surprise her husband, now carrying a surprise of her own that would take years to fully comprehend. The elevator reached the lobby, and I walked out into the heat of Miami. And somewhere inside me, the version of myself that had planned this surprise began to die. I walked for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, my heels clicking against the sidewalk, the Miami heat pressing against me like a physical force. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I needed to move, needed to put distance between myself and that hotel room, between myself and the image that was now burned into my brain like a brand. My phone buzzed in my purse. Derek. I declined the call without looking at the screen. It buzzed again, and again, and again. I turned off the phone entirely, dropping it back into my purse like it was contaminated. A taxi appeared at the curb, and I flagged it down without thinking, gave the driver the airport as my destination. I couldn't stay in Miami. I couldn't stay in the same city as them, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. Long day? The driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror with the casual curiosity of someone who spent his life observing strangers. You have no idea. He must have heard something in my voice, because he didn't ask any more questions. He just drove, and I stared out the window at a city I had never been to before and would never visit again, and I tried to make sense of what had happened. Simone. God, Simone. I had known her for 15 years. She had been the first person I called when Derek proposed. She had helped me pick out my wedding dress, had held my hand during 32 hours of labor, had been there for every milestone and crisis and celebration of my adult life. She was Zoe's godmother. She came to our house for Sunday dinners. She knew my secrets, my fears, my hopes for the future. She knew everything about me, and she had used that knowledge to slip into my life and steal my husband. The taxi pulled up to the airport, and I paid the driver and walked inside, and I bought a ticket for the next flight back to Atlanta. I had a daughter waiting for me at home, a life that needed to continue, a future that I would have to rebuild from scratch. But first, I would survive this day, and then I would survive the next one, and eventually, somehow, I would find a way to thrive. The surprise I had planned had shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. But it had also shown me something I needed to see, and that clarity, painful as it was, would be my salvation. The flight back to Atlanta was the longest 3 hours of my life. I sat in my window seat, staring at the clouds below us, seeing nothing but that hotel room. Every time I closed my eyes, the image was there. Derek and Simone, their bodies intertwined, their faces frozen in the moment of discovery. I had turned my phone back on during the layover in Charlotte, finding it flooded with messages. 17 missed calls from Derek, 12 text messages, each more desperate than the last. Please let me explain. It's not what it looked like. I love you, Monique. This was a mistake. Please call me back. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm so sorry. Please, baby, we can work through this. I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? I had seen what I had seen. No explanation could unsee it. There were messages from Simone too, 3 of them, each more pathetic than the last. Monique, please let me explain. I never meant for this to happen. I'm so sorry. Please call me. I deleted them without reading past the first line. There was nothing Simone could say that would make sense of what she had done. She had been my sister in every way that mattered, and she had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The plane touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson at 9:30, and I walked through the terminal like a ghost, my overnight bag heavy on my shoulder. I had packed for a romantic weekend. I was returning with a marriage in ruins. My mother was waiting at home with Zoe, just as I'd arranged before leaving. I had told her I was surprising Derek for our anniversary. I would have to tell her the truth eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, I just needed to hold my daughter. Zoe ran to me the moment I walked through the door, her 7-year-old energy undimmed by the late hour. Mommy, you're back early. Did Daddy like his surprise? I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, letting her warmth anchor me to the present moment. The surprise didn't work out the way I planned, baby. But I missed you, so I came home. I missed you too, Mommy. She squeezed me around the waist, then looked up with the directness only children possess. Why are you sad? I'm just tired from traveling. Let's get you to bed, okay? My mother, Patricia, watched us from the doorway to the kitchen, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She knew something was wrong. She would wait until Zoe was asleep to ask. It was nearly 11 when I finally sank onto the couch across from my mother. A cup of tea I had no intention of drinking cradled in my hands. The house was quiet. Zoe tucked into her bed, the world outside dark and still. What happened? My mother's voice was gentle but firm. And don't tell me nothing. I can see it in your face. I opened my mouth to speak, and the words stuck in my throat. How do you tell your mother that your marriage is a lie? That the man she celebrated at your wedding, the father of her grandchild, has been sleeping with your best friend for 1.5 years? I found Derek with someone else. The words came out flat, emotionless. In his hotel room. In Miami. My mother's face went through a transformation. Shock, then fury, then something that looked almost like grief. She set down her own cup with deliberate care. Who? I closed my eyes. Simone. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother knew Simone, loved Simone, had welcomed her into our family like another daughter. Lord have mercy, she whispered finally. That girl, that evil, deceitful girl. 18 months. I wasn't sure why that detail mattered, but I needed to say it out loud. He told me later, they've been together for 18 months. He called you? After what you saw? He's been calling non-stop since I left the hotel. I haven't answered. My mother moved to sit beside me on the couch, pulling me into her arms the way she had when I was a child. My baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I let myself be held. Let myself feel the warmth of her embrace. Let myself be small and protected for just a moment. The tears I had been holding back since Miami finally began to fall. Quiet at first, then harder, until I was sobbing against my mother's shoulder with a grief I couldn't contain. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the friend I thought I knew, for the future I had planned that would never come to pass. I cried until there was nothing left inside me but exhaustion and the cold, clear determination that had been building since I walked out of that hotel room. What are you going to do? My mother asked when the tears finally subsided. I don't know yet. I pulled back, wiping my face with the back of my hand. But I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to make a scene. And I'm not going to let him see me broken. That's my girl. My mother's eyes shone with pride and pain in equal measure. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Whatever you need, I'll provide. Right now, I just need to sleep. And then I need to figure out what comes next. But sleep, as it turned out, would not come easily. I lay in my bed, our bed, the one Derek and I had shared for 10 years, and stared at the ceiling until dawn began to lighten the windows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Every time I tried to rest, my mind raced with questions. How had I missed it? The signs must have been there, scattered throughout the past 18 months like breadcrumbs I had refused to follow. The late nights, the business trips, the distance that had grown between us like a wall I couldn't climb. And Simone, always there, always present, always watching. Had she been laughing at me the whole time, pitying me, enjoying the secret she shared with my husband? I thought about all the times she had come to our house for dinner, sitting across from me at the table while Derek poured wine, and I served food, and we played at being a happy couple. Had they been exchanging glances I didn't catch? Had they been texting under the table, planning their next meeting while I smiled and served and suspected nothing? The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that it felt almost unreal, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life, someone else's tragedy. This couldn't be happening to me. This couldn't be my marriage, my husband, my best friend. But it was. And by morning, I knew what I had to do. Derek came home Sunday afternoon, 2 days earlier than planned. I was waiting for him in the living room when he walked through the door, his suitcase in hand, his face a mask of guilt and fear, and something that might have been hope. Monique. He said my name like a prayer, like a plea. Thank God you're here. I was so worried when you wouldn't answer your phone. I looked at him. This man I had loved for 12 years, married for 10, trusted with my life and my future and the raising of our daughter, and I felt nothing but a cold, terrible clarity. How long? He set down his suitcase slowly, buying time. Baby, can we please just talk about this? I know what you saw was terrible, but... How long, Derek? The question landed like a slap. He flinched, and I watched the excuses die on his lips. 18 months, he said quietly. 18 months. A year and a half. More than 500 days of lies. And Simone, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Of all the people in the world, you chose my best friend, the godmother of our daughter. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Nothing happens for 18 months, Derek. That's not an accident. That's a choice. A choice you made over and over again, every single day, for a year and a half. He moved toward me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back, and something in my expression made him freeze. Don't. Monique, please. I love you. This was a mistake. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... No. The word hung between us, final and absolute. No? He looked genuinely confused, as if the possibility of my refusal had never occurred to him. I'm not interested in working through this, Derek. I'm not interested in counseling or explanations or second chances. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I picked up the folder I had prepared earlier, the one containing the business card of the divorce lawyer I had found online that morning. I handed it to him. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday. You can stay in the guest room until we figure out the logistics, but our marriage is over. He stared at the folder, then at me, his face a portrait of disbelief. Monique, please. Think about Zoe. Think about our family. I am thinking about Zoe. I'm thinking about what kind of example I want to set for her. And it's not this. It's not a mother who accepts betrayal because she's afraid to be alone. I walked past him toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom step. You should have thought about our family 18 months ago, Derek. It's too late to start now. I climbed the stairs without looking back, and somewhere behind me, I heard the sound of a man beginning to realize that the life he had taken for granted was coming to an end. The days that followed were a blur of practicalities and pain. I went through the motions of daily life, getting Zoe to school, going to work, cooking dinners I had no appetite for, while simultaneously dismantling the marriage I had built over a decade. The divorce lawyer I had found, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Green, had seen cases like mine 1,000 times. She listened to my story with professional sympathy, made notes in her legal pad, and laid out my options with clinical precision. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, she explained. That means marital assets will be divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. Given the circumstances of the infidelity and your husband's misuse of marital funds, I believe we can make a strong case for primary custody and a favorable settlement. Misuse of marital funds? Patricia slid a printout across her desk, bank statements I had accessed using the login information Derek had never thought to hide. Your husband spent approximately $12,000 on his affair over the past 18 months. Hotel rooms beyond what his company reimbursed. Dinners at restaurants you've never been to. A $5,000 necklace purchased 6 months ago that, I assume, you never received. I stared at the numbers, at the neat columns of betrayal itemized and totaled. $12,000. Money from our joint accounts, from the funds we had set aside for Zoe's education, from the future we were supposedly building together. He bought her jewelry, I said, the words tasting like ash. A Tiffany necklace, according to the receipt. Purchased in March. I thought about March, about what had been happening in my life during that month. Zoe's spring play at school, where she had played a flower in the garden scene. My annual review at work, where I had received a raise I had celebrated with Derek over dinner. The weekend we had spent at my mother's house, supposedly reconnecting as a family. While I was watching my daughter perform, while I was celebrating my achievements, while I was trying to strengthen my marriage, Derek had been buying jewelry for my best friend. I want everything, I said quietly. The house, primary custody, whatever I'm entitled to. We'll get it, Patricia said. Men like your husband rarely think about consequences until they're facing them. He assumed you would forgive him. That gives us leverage. Confronting Simone was something I knew I had to do, though I dreaded it more than I had dreaded anything in my life. I needed to look her in the eyes and ask the question that had been haunting me since Miami. Why? I chose a public place for the meeting, a coffee shop near my office, neutral territory where neither of us would be comfortable making a scene. Simone was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of something she wasn't drinking, her face a careful mask of contrition. Monique. She stood as I approached, arms lifting slightly as if for a hug before she thought better of it. Thank you for meeting me. I sat across from her without responding to her greeting. The woman looking back at me was the same woman I had known for 15 years. The same face, the same voice, the same mannerisms I knew as well as my own. But she was also a stranger now, a person I had never really known at all. Why? The question came out harder than I intended. Of all the men in the world, why him? Simone's composure cracked slightly. I never meant for it to happen. Stop. I held up a hand. Don't give me that. Things that happen for 18 months don't just happen. You made a choice. Over and over again, for a year and a half, you chose to betray me. I want to know why." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her untouched coffee. When she spoke, her voice was small. "I don't have a good answer, Monique. There isn't one. I was lonely and Derek was there, and one night it just crossed a line, and then it kept crossing it. You were lonely." I repeated the words flatly. "You destroyed my marriage because you were lonely." I know how it sounds. Do you? Because to me it sounds like you looked at everything I had. My husband, my family, my happiness. And you decided you wanted it for yourself. It sounds like you sat across from me at my dinner table, week after week, while you were sleeping with my husband. It sounds like you held my daughter and called yourself her godmother while you were stabbing me in the back. Tears spilled down Simone's cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Monique. I know I can never make this right. I know—" "You're right. You can't." I stood, my coffee untouched. "We're done, Simone. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't come to my house. Whatever we had, 15 years of friendship, everything we shared, you threw it away for 18 months of sneaking around with a married man. Monique, please. I'm not interested in your apologies. They don't change anything." I gathered my purse, preparing to leave. "But I want you to know something. I'm not going to spend my life being angry at you. That would give you too much power over me. I'm going to move on, and I'm going to build a life that's better than anything we had. And you? You get to live with what you did." I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving Simone sitting alone with her untouched coffee and her inadequate tears. Derek received the divorce papers on a Wednesday afternoon, served at his office by a process server who had interrupted a meeting with his biggest client. The humiliation was not intentional. The timing was simply when the server had been able to locate him. But I couldn't pretend I was sorry about it. He came home that evening with the papers clutched in his fist, his face flushed with anger I had never seen from him before. "You're really doing this?" He slammed the papers onto the kitchen counter. "You're not even going to try. Not even going to give me a chance. I gave you 10 years of chances, Derek. You used them to sleep with my best friend. One mistake doesn't erase a decade of marriage. It wasn't one mistake. It was 18 months of mistakes. 500 days of choosing her over me. $12,000 of our money spent on hotel rooms and dinners and jewelry for another woman." I met his eyes, refusing to look away. "You didn't make a mistake, Derek. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine. What about Zoe? Have you thought about what this will do to her?" The question was designed to hurt, and it did. But I had prepared for it. Zoe will be better off with parents who are honest about who they are than parents who are living a lie. She'll have 2 homes, 2 parents who love her, and a mother who showed her that self-respect matters more than convenience. Derek stared at me and I watched the fight drain out of him. He had expected me to crumble. He had expected tears and begging and eventual forgiveness. Instead, he found a woman who had already begun to move on. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said finally, his voice hollow. And yet it did. I picked up my keys, heading for the door. "I'm going to my mother's for dinner. Zoe is with her already. You can stay in the guest room while we work out the details. But I need you to understand something, Derek. This marriage is over. The only question now is whether we can end it with some dignity intact." I left him standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the legal documents that marked the end of our life together, and I drove to my mother's house feeling something I hadn't expected: relief. For the first time since Miami, the weight on my chest had begun to lift. The divorce proceedings took 8 months, far longer than I had hoped but shorter than it could have been. Derek contested initially, arguing that the marriage could be saved, that we owed it to Zoe to try counseling, that my discovery in Miami had been a shock that clouded my judgment. His arguments fell apart under the weight of evidence. Patricia, my lawyer, documented everything: the hotel receipts, the jewelry purchases, the phone records showing hundreds of texts between Derek and Simone during hours when he claimed to be working. By the 3rd month, even Derek's attorney was advising him to settle. The final agreement gave me primary custody of Zoe, with Derek having her every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. I kept the house, the family car, and 60% of our savings. Derek kept his retirement accounts and agreed to child support payments that would continue until Zoe turned 18. It was, Patricia assured me, a favorable outcome, but there was no triumph in it, only the grim satisfaction of closing a chapter that had brought me nothing but pain. Throughout the process, I forced myself to maintain a facade of normalcy for Zoe's sake. I took her to school and helped with her homework, and tucked her into bed each night with stories and songs. I answered her questions about why Daddy wasn't living with us anymore with careful honesty, explaining that sometimes parents decided to live in different houses, but that we both loved her and always would. "Is it because Daddy did something bad?" she asked one night, her 7-year-old intuition sharper than I had expected. I hesitated, weighing my answer. I would not lie to my daughter, but I would not burden her with truths she was too young to carry. "Daddy and I are having some grown-up problems," I said finally. "They're not your fault, and they don't change how much we love you. But sometimes when grown-ups have big problems, they need to live apart to solve them. Will you solve them, and then Daddy can come home?" I kissed her forehead, feeling my heart crack along familiar fault lines. "I don't know, baby. But whatever happens, you'll always have both of us. That's a promise." It was the best I could offer, and somehow, it was enough. The first year after the divorce was about survival. The second year was about reconstruction. By the third year, I had become someone even I didn't recognize. Stronger, more confident, more fully myself than I had ever been during my marriage. The transformation started small, a therapy session once a week, where I unpacked the trauma of betrayal and began to understand that Derek and Simone's choices said everything about them and nothing about my worth. A gym membership, used religiously, where I discovered that my body could do things I had never imagined and that physical strength translated into emotional resilience. A graduate school application, submitted on a whim, that resulted in acceptance to an executive MBA program at Emory. The MBA was the biggest investment of time and energy I had ever made in myself. For 2 years, I worked full-time while attending classes at night, studying on weekends while Zoe was at Derek's, writing papers at 2 in the morning, and showing up to work at 8, like nothing was different. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was exactly what I needed. My employer, the hospital system where I had worked for a decade, noticed the change in me. Within 6 months of completing my MBA, I was promoted to Director of Human Resources, a position I had dreamed about for years, but never thought would be mine. "You've earned this," my supervisor told me during the promotion meeting. "Your work has always been excellent, but lately there's something different about you. A confidence that wasn't there before." I knew what she meant. I had spent so many years defining myself in relation to Derek, as his wife, as the woman who supported his career, as the half of a couple rather than a whole person in my own right. Without him, I had been forced to discover who I was alone. The answer, as it turned out, was someone remarkable. Zoe thrived in the new arrangement, adjusting to the rhythm of 2 households with the resilience that children possess and adults often lack. She was 9 now, old enough to understand that her parents were happier apart than together, young enough to still believe in happy endings. "Mommy, when are you going to get a boyfriend?" she asked one Saturday afternoon, looking up from the book she was reading. I laughed, caught off guard by the question. Where did that come from? "Chelsea's mom has a boyfriend. They go on dates and stuff." She tilted her head, considering. "Don't you want someone to go on dates with?" "Maybe someday, baby. Right now, I'm happy with things the way they are." It was true, as far as it went. I had gone on a few dates since the divorce, coffee meetings and dinners arranged through apps and mutual friends, but none had led anywhere significant. I wasn't opposed to finding love again, but I wasn't desperate for it either. For the first time in my adult life, I was comfortable being alone, which is, of course, exactly when someone arrived to disrupt that comfort. Marcus Thompson was a professor of economics at Georgia State, a widower with 2 sons aged 11 and 13. We met at a charity gala I attended for work, one of those black tie affairs where everyone mingles with champagne glasses and pretends to understand art. He approached me near a painting I was examining, not to hit on me, but to share a joke about how pretentious the artist's statement was. I laughed before I could stop myself, and something in his eyes told me he had been hoping for exactly that reaction. "Marcus Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "And you are definitely too smart to be impressed by that painting." Monique Lawson. And I was actually quite impressed by how many words the artist used to say absolutely nothing. He laughed, a warm sound that seemed to fill the space around us. And just like that, I was interested. Our courtship was slow and cautious, as befitting two people who had been hurt before. Marcus had lost his wife to cancer 4 years earlier, and he carried his own grief carefully, unwilling to rush into anything that might dishonor her memory. I respected his caution. It matched my own. We talked on the phone for weeks before our first date. We dated for months before introducing each other to our children. We were together for a year before he met my mother. Every step was deliberate, considered, free of the breathless urgency that had characterized my relationship with Derek. "This feels different," I told my therapist during one of our sessions. "Safer somehow." "How so?" "With Derek, everything was fast. We fell in love fast, got engaged fast, got married fast. I didn't take time to really know him before committing my life to him." I paused, searching for words. "With Marcus, it's like we're building something instead of falling into something. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You're choosing with your eyes open this time." I was. And what I was choosing, Marcus, his sons, the blended family we were slowly constructing, felt like the right choice in a way nothing had felt for a long time. Derek and Simone's relationship, meanwhile, had collapsed under the weight of its own foundation. Without the excitement of secrecy, without the thrill of betrayal, they were just two people who had destroyed their lives for each other and now had to figure out what came next. "They broke up 6 months ago," my friend Carla reported during one of our dinners. "She moved to Charlotte, started over with a new firm that doesn't know her history. And Derek? Working, drinking, showing up for his weekends with Zoe but otherwise falling apart." Carla shook her head. "It's almost sad, watching him realize what he threw away. Almost sad, but not quite. I couldn't summon sympathy for a man who had spent 18 months lying to my face, who had turned my best friend into his accomplice, who had shattered my trust in both love and friendship simultaneously. What I could summon was indifference. Derek's suffering was not my concern. His redemption, if it came, was not my responsibility. I had moved on, completely and irrevocably, and the life I was building now had no room for him except as Zoe's father. The conversation I dreaded came 2.5 years after the divorce, when Derek asked to meet me for coffee. We had maintained a civil relationship for Zoe's sake, coordinating schedules, exchanging information about her school and health, being polite at the handoffs that happened twice a week. But we hadn't sat down alone together since the day I served him with divorce papers. I agreed to the meeting partly out of curiosity, partly out of a sense that some conversations needed to happen for proper closure. We met at a neutral cafe, one neither of us had visited before, choosing a table in the corner where we could talk privately. Derek looked older than I remembered. Worn. The confident man who had once commanded every room he entered seemed to have been replaced by someone smaller, diminished by circumstances he had created for himself. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wasn't drinking. "What did you want to talk about?" He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Simone and I ended things 6 months ago. I heard. We tried to make it work. For a while it seemed like maybe we could. But," he shook his head, "without the secrecy, there wasn't much there. Just two people who had hurt everyone around them and couldn't figure out how to stop hurting each other." I waited, unsure where this was going. "I made the biggest mistake of my life, Monique. I threw away everything. You, our marriage, our family, for something that turned out to be nothing." He looked at me, his eyes full of a pain I couldn't entirely dismiss. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry." "I believe you," I said carefully, "but sorry doesn't change what happened." I know it doesn't." He leaned forward. "But I also know that you're seeing someone, that professor from Georgia State. And I keep thinking, if you can forgive me, if we could try again." I held up a hand, stopping him. "No. Monique. No, Derek. What we had is over. It was over the moment I opened that hotel room door. You don't get to spend 18 months betraying me and then ask for another chance because your betrayal didn't work out. People make mistakes. That wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in an argument. What you did was deliberate, calculated, sustained over a year and a half. I met his eyes steadily. You didn't slip and fall into bed with Simone. You chose her, over and over again, every single day. And now you want me to forget all of that because you're lonely? He flinched but didn't look away. I still love you, Monique. Maybe you do, but love isn't enough. It never was. If you had really loved me in the way a husband should love a wife, you wouldn't have been capable of doing what you did. We sat in silence, the words settling between us like stones. So that's it? Derek's voice was hollow. We're really done? We've been done for 3 years, Derek. I've just been waiting for you to accept it. I stood, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. You're a good father to Zoe. Focus on that. Focus on being the best dad you can be. And maybe someday, you'll find someone who can give you another chance. But that someone won't be me. I left him sitting alone in the cafe, and as I walked to my car, I felt something shift inside me. The last thread connecting me to my old life had been cut. I was truly free now. Marcus proposed 6 months after my conversation with Derek, in a moment that was as simple and sincere as everything about our relationship. We were cooking dinner together in my kitchen, the way we did most weeknights now. Our children scattered throughout the house doing homework and arguing over video games. "Marry me," he said, not as a question but as a statement, like he was asking me to pass the salt. I turned from the stove, spatula still in hand, to find him holding a ring box. "What?" "Marry me." He smiled, that warm smile I had fallen in love with. I've been trying to figure out the perfect way to ask. Some romantic dinner or elaborate surprise. And then I realized that this is us. Cooking dinner together. Building a life together. I don't need perfect. I need you. I looked at the ring, a simple diamond on a gold band, elegant without being ostentatious, and then at the man holding it. The man who had never lied to me, never given me reason to doubt, never made me feel like I was less than extraordinary. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely yes." The kids came running at our shouting, demanding to know what was happening. And soon the kitchen was chaos. 4 children jumping and celebrating, 2 adults laughing and crying and holding each other amid the commotion. It was nothing like my first engagement, which had been a carefully staged affair at an expensive restaurant with a photographer hidden nearby. This was messy and loud and perfect in its imperfection. The wedding was held in Savannah, overlooking the river, on a spring evening that felt like a gift from the universe. Marcus's sons, Jalen and Deshaun, stood beside him as his best men. Zoe walked ahead of me, scattering petals with the concentration of a surgeon. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief she had brought specifically for this purpose. Marcus watched me approach with an expression I had once thought I would never see again from any man. Pure, uncomplicated love. No shadows, no secrets, no reservations. Just joy. "You're amazing," he whispered as I reached the altar. "You're not so bad yourself." The officiant spoke the familiar words, and we repeated them with the sincerity of people who understood exactly what they were promising. When Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the last vestiges of my old life fall away, replaced by something stronger and more beautiful. "You may kiss the bride." He did, and the room erupted in applause, and I was married again, but this time, to someone who deserved me. The reception lasted well into the night, a celebration filled with dancing and toasting, and the laughter of family finally united. My mother made a speech that had everyone crying. Jalen and Deshaun performed a choreographed dance they had been practicing for months. Zoe demanded multiple dances with her new stepfather, who lifted her onto his feet and waltzed her around the floor while she giggled. Late in the evening, I stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet, looking out at the lights reflected on the river. The night was warm and still, full of promise. "Hiding from your own party?" Marcus appeared behind me, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. "Just taking it in." I accepted the glass he offered, clinking it against his. Did you ever think when we met at that pretentious art gala that we'd end up here? Honestly, I hoped. He moved to stand beside me, his arm around my waist. I saw something in you that night. A strength. A light that hadn't been dimmed by everything you'd been through. I thought, that's someone worth knowing. Someone worth waiting for. I wasn't looking for anyone. I know. That's part of what made you worth finding. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the water flow by, feeling the rightness of the moment. Do you ever think about it? Marcus asked quietly. About what happened in Miami? I considered the question. 3 years ago, the memory of that hotel room had been a wound that wouldn't heal, a constant source of pain that colored everything I did. Now, it was a scar. Still visible, still part of my story, but no longer bleeding. Sometimes, I admitted. Not as often as I used to. And not with the same pain. What do you feel when you think about it now? Gratitude, mostly. I turned to look at him, this man who had shown me what real love looked like. What I walked into that day shattered me. But the pieces that were left, the pieces I had to rebuild from, they turned out to be stronger than what was there before. The Japanese have a word for that, Marcus said. Kintsugi. The art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The idea is that the breaks become part of the history, and the repaired piece is more beautiful than the original. Kintsugi. I tried the word, liked how it felt. That's exactly right. Derek broke me. But what I built from the broken pieces, my career, my independence, my sense of self, that's worth more than anything I had before. And us? Are we part of the repair? You're the gold, I said simply. You and the boys, and the family we're building together. You're what makes the breaks beautiful instead of just damaged. Marcus pulled me closer, and we watched the river flow past, carrying the reflections of 100 lights toward the sea. 5 years after Miami, I stood in the living room of the house I shared with Marcus, surrounded by evidence of the life we had built together. Family photos covered the walls, our wedding, birthday parties, vacations, the ordinary moments that make up an extraordinary life. 5 children moved through the space like a force of nature. Zoe, now 12, Jalen and Deshawn, now teenagers, and the twins, Eleanor and Thomas, born a year after our wedding, who had transformed us from a blended family into an expanded one. Mom! Zoe's voice echoed from upstairs. Have you seen my soccer cleats? Check the mudroom, I called back, smiling at the familiar chaos. Marcus appeared from the kitchen, twin toddlers balanced on each hip, looking exactly like the overwhelmed father he was. These two need to be changed, fed, and entertained simultaneously. Any suggestions? Start with changing. Everything is harder when they're uncomfortable. Words of wisdom from the mother of 5. Stepmother of 3, mother of 3, so technically 6. However you count it, you're remarkable. He leaned in for a kiss, careful not to squish the twins between us. I love you. I love you too. I watched him carry the twins toward the changing table. This man who had shown me that love could be honest and easy, that partnership meant showing up every day without conditions or reservations. On a shelf in my home office sat a small framed photograph, not a family portrait or wedding picture, but an image I had saved from a travel website. An anonymous hotel corridor, doors stretching into the distance, the kind of hallway that exists in every hotel in every city in the world. It reminded me of room 1412, of the moment that had shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, of the woman I had been before and the woman I had become after. I kept the photo as a reminder, not of the pain, but of the resilience, not of what I had lost, but of what I had gained. I had flown to Miami to surprise my husband. What I walked into shattered me. But from those shattered pieces, I built a life more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. The kintsugi was complete, the gold was visible, and I was finally irrevocably whole.